When the Apache women came, the sun was setting behind the mesa, painting the desert sky the color of blood and gold. When I first saw them coming across the valley, 10 figures on horseback, moving with the fluid grace that marked them as Apache even from a distance, I set down my coffee cup on the porch rail and reached for the Winchester leaning against the post. Not out of hostility, but out of the caution that had kept me alive these past 5 years alone on the ranch. My name is Samuel McKenna, and I'd come to this God-forsaken stretch of Arizona territory in 1878, after the war had taken everything I'd ever cared about back in Missouri. The ranch wasn't much, a small adobe house, a barn that had seen better days, and enough land to graze maybe 50 head of cattle, but it was mine. Bought with my last dollar and the gold I'd panned from the creek that ran through the property during the spring melt. I'd had my share of run-ins with the Apache over the years. Most were just passing through, taking what they needed and moving on. I'd learned early that showing respect and keeping my word went a lot further than bullets, though I kept those handy just the same. The Chiricahua and the Western Apache had been fighting the army for decades, and tensions ran high throughout the territory. As the riders drew closer, I could see they were all women, which struck me as unusual. Apache women were fierce and capable, to be sure, but they rarely traveled in groups without their men, especially not this far from their traditional lands. They rode with purpose, their backs straight, their dark eyes fixed on my small homestead. The woman in the lead was perhaps 30 years old, with silver threads beginning to show in her long black hair. She wore traditional Apache clothing, a duskin dress decorated with turquoise beads, high moccasins and a red headband. When she was close enough that I could see her face clearly, she raised her right hand in a gesture of peace. I set the rifle aside but kept it within reach, and stepped down from the porch. "You're welcome to water your horses," I called out in what little Apache I'd picked up over the years, "but I don't have much else to offer." The lead woman dismounted and approached me with the measured steps of someone who had faced danger many times and lived to tell about it. When she spoke, it was in English, heavily accented but clear. "You are McKenna," she said. It wasn't a question. "I am. And you are?" "I am Ayanna. These are my sisters." She gestured to the other women, who had formed a semicircle behind her. "We have traveled far to speak with you." I noticed that she used the word sisters in a way that might mean blood relatives or simply other Apache women. The distinction seemed less important than the fact that they had sought me out specifically. "Well then, speak," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But I'll warn you, I don't have much truck with anyone who means harm to me or mine." Ayanna's weathered face remained impassive. "We do not come to fight, McKenna. We come because our children are dying." The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd heard rumors from traders and travelers about disease and starvation among the Apache bands that had been forced onto the reservations, but I'd tried not to think too hard about it. It was easier to focus on my own survival. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said carefully, "but I don't see how I can help." "You can help," said another woman, stepping forward. She was younger than Ayanna, maybe 25, with scars on her arms that spoke of hard living. "Because we want children." The words hung in the desert air like smoke from a distant fire. I felt my face flush and took a step backward. "Now hold on just a minute. Not like that," Ayanna said, and I caught what might have been amusement in her dark eyes. "You think like a white man, always about taking and owning. We speak of survival." I relaxed slightly but remained confused. "Then what exactly are you asking?" The young woman who had spoken before moved closer. "My name is Ciala. This winter 7 children in our band died from the coughing sickness, 3 more from hunger. The Indian agents give us spoiled food and thin blankets. Our men grow angry and talk of leaving the reservation to fight again, but fighting will only bring more death. The soldiers will hunt them down," I said quietly. "You know that?" "Yes," Ayanna replied, "and then we all die. Men, women, children. So we seek another way." Another woman stepped forward, older than the others, her hair completely gray. "I am Nayeli, grandmother to many who now lie in the ground. I have lived through 40 winters and seen much change. The old ways are ending. We must find new ways or our people vanish like smoke." I was beginning to understand, and the realization made my stomach tighten. "You want me to help you leave the reservation?" "No," Ayana said firmly. We want to bring children here. The silence stretched between us like a taut rope. In the distance a coyote howled and one of the horses snorted and stamped its feet. Here? I repeated. To my ranch? Your land is good, Ciala said, gesturing toward the creek and the pasture where my small herd grazed. Water runs year-round, grass grows thick, game is plentiful in the hills. And you, she paused, studying my face. You do not look at us with hatred. You've been watching me, I said. It wasn't a question. For many months, Nayeli confirmed. You trade fairly with our men when they come for horse. You leave game by the big rock for families that have hunger. You do not report to the soldiers when you see our people moving through your land. I had done those things, though I'd tried to be subtle about it. The truth was I'd seen enough death and suffering during the war to last several lifetimes. If I could ease someone's burden without causing trouble for myself, I generally did. Even so, I said, what you're asking, it's not that simple. The army, the territorial government, the Indian agents, they'd never allow it. We do not ask for their permission, Ayana said. We ask for yours. Another woman came forward, carrying a small bundle in her arm. When she unfolded the blanket, I saw a child, a boy maybe 3 years old, sleeping fitfully. His breathing was labored, and even in the dim light I could see that he was too thin. This is my son, Nalnish, the woman said softly. His father died fighting the soldiers last year. There is no food for him on the reservation, and the winter was hard. He grows weaker each day. The sight of the sick child stirred something deep in my chest. I thought of my own son, who had died of fever when he was barely 2 years old, back in Missouri before the war took everything else. You want to hide children here, I said slowly. On my land. Not hide, Ayana corrected. Live, learn, grow strong. Some of our young ones, they could learn the ways of both peoples. When they are grown, they could move between the worlds. And if the authorities find out, then we all face the consequences together. I looked at the faces surrounding me. Weathered, proud, desperate. These women had risked everything to come here, to make this request of a stranger. They could have simply taken what they needed and moved on, but instead they had chosen to ask to trust. How many children? I asked. To start, perhaps 5 or 6. Later, maybe more. And their mothers, some would stay to care for them. Others would return to the reservation, to avoid suspicion. We would take turns. I walked to the edge of the porch and looked out across my land. It was a good spread, better than I needed for just myself. The creek could support more people, and there was plenty of room to build additional shelters. But the risks? The army patrols come through here every few months, I said. If they found Apache children on my land, we would teach them to hide, Cialis, and if hiding failed, we would say we captured them from raiders. White settlers adopt Indian children all the time. It was true, though the practice was more often born of charity than justice. Still, it would provide some cover. And what would you want from me, besides the use of my land? Your protection, Nayeli said. Your name. In the eyes of the law, this is your place. And you're teaching some of our children should learn to read and write in English, to count money, to understand the ways of the white world. I'm not much of a teacher. You can read, Ayana observed. You can write. You understand how to work within the white man's law. That is more than most of our children will ever learn on the reservation. The boy in his mother's arms coughed, a harsh sound that spoke of fluid in his lungs. His mother adjusted the blanket around him, her face a mask of worry and determination. What if I say no? I asked. Then we will try somewhere else, Ayana said simply. And if no one will help, we will take our children into the mountains and try to survive the old way. Some will live, many will die, but at least they will die free. I knew she meant it. The Apache had been fighting for their freedom for decades, and they would continue fighting even when the odds were hopeless. It was both their greatest strength and their most tragic flaw. If I agree to this, I said slowly, it can't be a temporary thing. Once it starts, we're all committed. There's no backing out when things get difficult. We understand, several of the women said at once. And there will have to be rules. My rule. This is still my land. And if we're going to avoid trouble with the authorities, we need to be smart about how we do things. What rules? Ayana asked. First, no more than 6 children at a time, at least to start. Too many, and people will start asking questions. Second, they need to learn English, and they need to learn it fast. If they can't pass for adopted or captured children when strangers come around, we're all in danger. I paused, thinking through the implications. Third, everyone who stays here works. I don't care if it's traditional Apache work or ranch work, but everyone contributes. Fourth, no weapons visible when there are visitors. I know your people are fighters, but we can't afford to look threatening. And fifth, Nayeli asked, sensing there was more. Fifth, if this goes bad, if the army finds out, if the territorial government comes down on us, everyone scatters immediately. No heroic last stands, no fighting to the death. We run, we hide, we survive to try again another day. The women exchanged glances, communicating in the way that people who had lived and fought together could do without words. These terms are acceptable, Ayana said finally. When do we begin? I looked at the sick child again, then at the faces of the women who had entrusted me with their most precious possessions. There was no going back from this moment. We begin now, I said. Bring the boy inside. Let's see what we can do for his cause. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity, while Siala and the boy's mother, who told me her name was Itzel, tended to the child inside my house. The other women set up a temporary camp in the meadow near the creek. They worked with efficient silence, raising traditional Apache shelters called wickiups with practiced ease. I brewed willow bark tea for the boy's fever and cough, something I'd learned during the war when medicine was scarce. Itzel watched everything I did with sharp attention, asking questions about the preparation and dosage. She was learning not just how to help her son, but how to treat similar ailments in other children. By midnight the boy's breathing had eased somewhat, and his fever had broken. Itzel looked at me with tears in her eyes. She whispered. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, I said. This is just the beginning. Over the next several days, the women gradually integrated into the rhythm of ranch life. 3 more children arrived, 2 girls and another boy, all between the ages of 4 and 8. They were quiet and watchful at first, but children adapt quickly, and soon they were helping with small chores and playing along the creek. The Apache women proved to be invaluable workers. They knew things about the land that I had never learned, despite 5 years of living on it. They showed me edible plants I had overlooked, better ways to track game, and how to read the weather signs and the behavior of animals and birds. In return, I began teaching the children English. We started with simple words: water, food, horse, house, and gradually worked up to more complex concepts. The girls, Ayana and Siala's daughters, were particularly quick learners. The boys were more interested in the practical aspects of ranch work, learning to care for cattle and horses. The first real test came 3 weeks after the women had arrived. A patrol of cavalry soldiers rode up to the house one afternoon, dusty and tired from a long patrol. I met them on the porch, my heart pounding but my face calm. Afternoon, McKenna, said the lieutenant in charge, a young man with sunburned skin and nervous eyes. We're looking for some missing Indians, a group of women and children, who left the reservation without permission. Haven't seen any Indians, I said truthfully. At that moment, I could see Apache women and children, but they had all taken shelter in the root cellar or hidden in the tall grass along the creek, as we had practiced. Mind if we look around? Help yourself, I said, knowing they would find nothing suspicious. Can I offer you some water? It's a hot day. The soldiers searched for about an hour, but they were looking for a camp, not for people who had melted into the landscape like shadows. They found my cattle, my horses, and evidence of my normal ranch activities. Nothing more. Sorry to bother you, the lieutenant said as they prepared to leave. If you do see anything suspicious, I'll let you know, I promised. After they were gone, the Apache gradually emerged from their hiding places. The children were excited by the game of hiding, but the women were gray. This will not be the last time, Nayeli warned. I know, I said, but we fooled them once. We can do it again. As the months passed, our strange community found its rhythm. The children grew stronger and healthier on regular meals and clean water. They learned English quickly, as children do, but their mothers made sure they also learned Apache traditions and stories. They were becoming something new, while cultural bridges between 2 worlds. I found myself growing attached to all of them, but especially to little Nalnish, Itzel's son. He had recovered completely from his illness, and had become my shadow, following me around the ranch and asking endless questions in his mixture of Apache and English. Sam, he said one evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, "Are you my father now?" The question caught me off guard. "No, son, you have a father even though he's not here anymore, but I'm your friend, and I'll take care of you." "Good," he said matter-of-factly. "I like having both." Winter came and went without incident. We had several more visits from patrols, but our system of hiding and concealment worked perfectly. To the outside world, I was still a solitary rancher scratching out a living in the desert. The reality was very different. My ranch had become a small village, a place where Apache and Anglo ways blended into something new. The children spoke both languages fluently. They could track deer and brand cattle, tell traditional stories and do arithmetic, make bows and arrows and repair harnesses. In the spring, Ayana brought news from the reservation. "More families want to send children," she told me. "Word has spread about what we are doing here." "How many more?" "Perhaps 10, maybe 15. I considered this carefully. More children meant more risk, but it also meant more lives saved. "We'll need to expand," I said. "Build more shelters, dig a better well, and we'll need to be even more careful. We are prepared to do whatever is necessary." And so we grew. By the end of the second year there were 23 children living on my ranch, along with 8 Apache women, who served as teachers, caretakers, and guardians. To anyone who asked, they were my hired hands, a not uncommon arrangement in a territory where labor was scarce. The children were thriving. The older ones could read and write in English, and do basic mathematics. They could also hunt with traditional weapons, prepare Apache foods, and speak their native language fluently. They were becoming what Ayana had envisioned, people who could move between worlds. One evening, as I sat on the porch watching the children play by the creek, Nayali joined me. "You have given us more than land," she said quietly. "You have given us hope for the future. You've given me something too," I replied. "Purpose, family." "Is this what you expected when we first came?" I laughed. "Not even close. I thought you were going to ask me to." I paused, embarrassed. "We know what you thought," Nayali said with amusement. "White men always think with the body first, the mind second, and the heart last. We Apache women think in the opposite order. And what does your heart tell you now?" "That this is good," she said simply. "That our children will survive and remember who they are, while also learning who they can become." As the years passed, our hidden community continued to grow and evolve. Some of the children, when they came of age, chose to return to their people on the reservation. Others stayed on the ranch, becoming skilled cowboys and farmers. A few even ventured into the towns and cities, using their education to find work in stores, schools, and government offices. But they all carried with them the lessons they had learned in our makeshift family, that survival sometimes requires adaptation, that different cultures can enrich each other rather than destroy each other, and that hope can flourish even in the most unlikely places. The day finally came, when the last of the cavalry patrols stopped searching for the missing Apache women and children. The authorities had moved on to other concerns, other wars. Our secret was safe. By then I was an old man, and many of the original children had children of their own. Some lived nearby, others had scattered across the territory and beyond, but they all remembered the ranch where they had learned to be both Apache and American, where they had discovered that identity could be fluid and multiple rather than fixed and singular. Nalnish, the sick little boy who had been among the first to arrive, became a successful trader, moving easily between Apache communities and white settlements. He often brought his own children to visit the ranch, telling them stories about the place where their father had learned to read and write, to rope cattle and track deer, to be proud of all the parts of himself. "Tell them about the day the Apache women came," I would say, and he would smile and begin the story again, keeping alive the memory of that sunset evening, when 10 determined women had changed all our lives forever. Looking back now, I realized that what those women were asking for was not really about children at all. They were asking for a future, a way for their people to survive and adapt without losing their essential selves. They were asking for hope in a world that seemed to offer none. And somehow, impossibly, we had managed to give it to them. The ranch still stands today, though I am long gone. It serves as a school now, where Apache and other native children learn alongside Anglo students. The old adobe house has been expanded many times, but the original porch remains, looking out over the same creek where children once played and learned and grew into something new. Sometimes visitors ask about the strange mix of Apache and cowboy artifacts that fill the place, about the stories carved into the wooden beams of the main house. The current teachers,
many of them descendants of those original children, smile and tell them the story of the 10 Apache women who came seeking children, and the lonely rancher who said yes. It was never an easy life, and there were many moments of fear and uncertainty, but it was a good life, filled with purpose and love, and the knowledge that we had done something that mattered. In the end, that's all any of us can hope for, to live in such a way that the world is a little better for our having been in. Those 10 Apache women, with their fierce determination and their willingness to trust a stranger, had given all of us that chance, and we had taken it.